Did you know that Orlando has more lakes per square mile than just about any city in the entire country? Would you like to live on one like I do? Welcome to the Orlando Real Estate Lifestyle Podcast, where we explore the intersection of Orlando real estate and your best life. I'm Phil Kruse, here to help you make the most out of your journey right here in the City Beautiful. Today's topic is part of a multi-part series on how to buy a lake house in Orlando. For this episode, we'll focus on selecting the best lakes to target when trying to make your lakefront dreams a reality. But first, you can always find me on all social platforms @_Phil Kruse. That's Kruse with a K. And look, while you're here, you might as well like and share my podcast with your friends, leave me a review, and don't forget to subscribe. Of course, if you need help buying a lakefront property like I did, or if you need advice from a pro listing agent, just shoot me a DM on social media. I'd be happy to help to use my expertise to serve you. Now, I live on a lake. When I first graduated from UCF and got a great job right out of school, and I realized I had a career path to start making some really good money, I was very blessed. And I lived here for a couple of years and realized, man, there's lakes everywhere. You live here in Orlando, maybe, and if you don't, there's not a straight road in Orlando. Within a few blocks, you're going to hit something and the road's going to curve. That something is almost always a lake. I thought to myself, man, there's so many lakes in Orlando. I got to be able to find a property one day to live, to move into and be living on a lake. Lucky for me, I was able to make that dream a reality. And I know that dream can become a reality for you by the sheer volume of lakefront property, and from the fact that you're listening to my podcast, where you're going to get tips on how to pick the best lake and eventually how to strike on either buying your dream lakefront home or building a lakefront property, which is actually what I did. Number one, for me, living on a clean lake that me and my family can swim in and enjoy was one of the most important qualifying factors on selecting a lake. Now, Orlando was founded many, many years ago on the back of our citrus workers. There was citrus groves all over greater Orlando, and with high-level industrial agriculture came lots and lots of pollution. So unfortunately, a lot of the lakes in Orlando and really in all of Florida got heavily polluted with fertilizers, and you want to make sure you get on a lake that isn't still going through some sort of a revitalization process. Okay. The easiest way to do that is by simply hopping on Google Earth and looking at the color of the lakes in your area. Now, here's an interesting tip. The blacker the lake on Google Earth, the cleaner. To me, that was counterintuitive. The greener the lake, the more polluted. All you have to do is go a little bit farther north and west of downtown Orlando on Google Earth and look at Lake Apopka. That bad boy is like lime green, okay? You don't want to live on Lake Apopka. Now, if you already do, it's a beautiful lake. It's big, but man, it's polluted. The residents know that, and they are doing, the municipalities are doing all they can to clean it up. Look for a black lake and you are good to go. Some of the cleanest lakes in all of Florida are right here in Orlando, including the Butler chain. I'm talking Isleworth, where Tiger lives, where Shaq's house used to be, Shaquille O'Neal. That is some of the cleanest lake chains in the whole country. And then right here, closer to downtown where I live, the Conway chain is also extremely clean. Check it out yourself. Another good thing to do is to call the local municipality. You want to call Orange County if you're anywhere in and around Greater Orlando, or any of the other counties if you're looking farther north, if you're elsewhere in the state, and they're going to be able to tell you about the water quality. Now, if you're looking at a smaller lake, they may not have that data. So you could be a citizen scientist and you can take a sample yourself and pay to have that lake water analyzed, or perhaps a neighbor or friend that living on that lake has already done that. You want to be careful about blue-green algae. All right, in the summers when it gets really hot, especially on smaller lakes and lakes that don't have a lot of good flow, you're going to see a bloom, as they call it, of blue-green algae. And that stuff can be toxic. It can be hard to breathe. It's almost like a light version of red tide that you'd see on the west coast of Florida that can hinder your breathing and stuff. And you definitely don't want to be swimming in it. And it's kind of a sad situation, but that's something you want to ask about when you call. Are there blue-green algae concerns in this particular lake? The second thing I would recommend that you decide if it's important to you or not is, do you want to live on a skiable lake? And by skiable, I mean, is the lake, can you have a motorboat on that lake? Okay. A jet ski, like I do. Okay. Some people that's important, some it's not. The easiest way is to drive by the lake and just look through the side yard into people's backyards to see if they have a boathouse or a jet ski or something like that. That's a pretty obvious clue. Okay. Now maybe they have a jet ski on there and it's illegal. But usually that's not the case. And you can't always judge whether it's skiable or not by the size of the lake. Okay. There's plenty of small lakes around here that are actually skiable. So another thing you could do is call the local municipality. This is going to be a continued drumbeat. Okay. You can also hire a real estate agent like myself who can help you assess the property and the lakes in the area to determine if they're skiable or not. And they might be willing to call the municipality on your behalf. Speaking of skiable, should you be concerned about the noise on a skiable lake? If you live on a larger lake, like Lake Conway, for example, that can be really busy with boat traffic, water skiers, jet skiers, nowadays wakeboarders and wake surfers, that could be pretty loud. And depending on if it's a public or private lake, which we'll talk more about later, that noise could be going on during the day. If you work from home, certainly on the weekends, you may want to consider, maybe I don't want to live on a skiable lake, just for sheer virtue of reducing the noise. Maybe paddleboarding or kayaking is enough. And the last thing to think about with the skiable lakes is the wave action. Okay, so depending on what you want your shorefront to look like, or what sort of lifestyle you want to live on the shorefront of your lake, constant wave action splashing into your grass, and eroding your shorefront. Does it have a seawall or not? That might be something you want to consider. Don't forget now, while you're here, go give me a plug, like my podcast, share it with your friends. I'd really appreciate it. It drops every Monday. If you subscribe, you'll get a little bell that tells you it's coming. Last topic we'll talk about today in this short podcast about lakes, and there's going to be more coming specifically for purchasing homes on a lake. Are you scared about alligators? That's usually the first question I get, especially from Brazilians. My wife's Brazilian. Are there alligators on a lake? Well, look, I'm from Miami. I'm an Eagle Scout. I grew up camping. There's a park down in Miami in the Everglades called Shark Valley. Okay. One time, me and my family went there after a cold front, and all the alligators came out onto the bike path to sun themselves in the morning. And we were there early to ride bikes. And I was literally zigzagging around the alligators, and they were huge. I mean, you're out in the Everglades. These guys, this was their house. And honestly, I wasn't scared at all. It was just something I was used to. Used to see them all the time. Now, granted, where was I? I was in the Everglades. Okay. I was out in the middle of nowhere in a national park. Okay. So are you scared of alligators? Do you want to be conscious of that fact when you're going to buy a lakefront property? Well, a simple rule of thumb is the farther away you are from downtown Orlando, the more alligators there's going to be, right? The farther away you get from downtown Orlando, the likelihood increases that you're going out into an area that is less populated, okay? The lake I live on is only 1.5 miles, 2 miles from downtown, and there are no alligators. Yes, there are no alligators. Everyone wants to question me on that. I assure you, okay? The lakes that have alligators are out there, Lake Monroe and Sanford, out there in Winter Garden, in the areas that are just newly developed, way down south, the Kissimmee, Lake Nona area. A lot of these wild lakes that are connected to state and national parks are certainly going to have alligators. In my opinion, you don't really need to be scared. Now, if you have small kids, if you have small dogs, you certainly want to be a little more conscious of it. Maybe you want to put a fence up while they're young. I wouldn't worry about it, but be aware of it. Now, how do gators even become dangerous in the first place? Alligators don't eat people naturally, okay? What you want to be concerned with is you or your neighbors feeding the alligators. If you do live on a big lake out in the boonies, right, or farther from city center, if you guys are feeding the alligators, that is a red flag. That is you are removing the alligator's natural fear of humans. They see you, they think food. Okay, so now they're going to start coming every time they see a human, whether it's a kid or an adult. If they show up and they're hungry and they're used to getting fed and there is no food, now you become the food. That is a huge problem. Do not feed the gators, even if it's not your lake. It could lead to, obviously, a very nasty situation. Now, what if you do already live on a lake, or just you want to know, once you do live on a lake, if there is a gator, because gators do travel from lake to lake, and no matter what I say, even though my lake doesn't have gators, there is always a possibility that a lake could travel in, or a gator could travel into our lake and eventually settle here. So what do? You call the Fish and Wildlife Commission. If the gator is of a certain size, and not even that big, 4 or 5 feet, that may sound big to people out there, but it's not. We're talking from the snout to the tail, not very big. Once it gets to a certain size, the Fish and Wildlife Commission will remove the gator and relocate it out to its wild habitat. So for me, it's not a big deal, because before the gator even gets big enough to be a nuisance to even a small dog, it's, unless you live out in an area where they're going to be like, hey, this is the gator's natural habitat, there's nothing we can do, then you're not going to have anything to worry about. You can get that gator removed. So living your best Orlando lifestyle may one day include living on a lake, and I can help you with that. Or if you already live on a lake and need to sell your home, I'm an expert listing agent. So just hit me up on Instagram or on Facebook @_ Phil Kruse. That's Kruse with a K. And come on, just take 2 seconds to like my podcast, share the link with your friends, and subscribe. And always know, your best life in Orlando is within reach. Keep embracing every moment. Cheers.